Her ribs cracked against the floor before her grip ever loosened. Kira Voss heard the sound before she felt it, a wet snap somewhere under her left arm, and still her forearm stayed, locked across the giant's throat. 4 massive limbs thrashed against an energy barrier that hummed and sparked with each impact. The crowd above had gone utterly silent, which was the wrong detail, because a crowd watching a human die screaming should have been louder, not quieter. Gorthak the Render outweighed her by more than 100 kilograms. His bone-plated shoulders alone could have shielded a starship hatch. None of that mattered now. Her bare hand found the gap where his neck plates failed to overlap, and she pulled. The arena had stripped her of every blade, every charge pack, every piece of plating issued to a Terran vanguard combatant. No mechanical weapons, no energy weapons, just skin against skin, the oldest rule in the galaxy's newest court. The trial banned weapons. Nobody had thought to ban hands. 3-time champion. That was the number the delegates kept repeating in the observation gallery, over and over, like a chant meant to ward off what they were watching. 3-time champion, on his knees, his forearms losing the rhythm that had made him unbeatable for 9 cycles running. He slammed her against the deck again. Her vision sparked white at the edges. She did not let go. I'll be honest, what I watched that day rewired how an entire sector thought about my species. Stay with me, because the part where it started is stranger than the ending. 11 hours earlier, Kira had been doing nothing more dramatic than taping her own knuckles. The preparation chamber smelled of recycled station air, and the mineral tang of basalt dust tracked in from the arena floor. She sat on a low bench, wrapping cloth tape around fingers that already carried old scar tissue, white lines crossing white lines. A multi-eyed station assistant named Pix kept glancing at her from the doorway, then looking away, then glancing again, like she might do something unpredictable if watched too long. "You're not wearing the suit," Pix said finally. 4 of its 6 eyes blinked out of sequence. "I am wearing the suit." Kira held up one gray-sleeved arm. Standard issue, no plating, no weave reinforcement. The proving grounds didn't permit anything else. "You mean I'm not wearing armor?" "No one competes without armor." Pix's voice carried the particular nervousness of a creature whose job was paperwork, not violence. The Euro champion alone could remove a limb with incidental contact. "Then I'll try not to be incidental." Kira finished the tape on her right hand and flexed it once, listening to the knuckles pop. Down the corridor, in the holding pen reserved for the day's other combatants, a Euro diplomat was already laughing about her. Kira didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of the joke. She'd heard versions of it on a dozen stations across a dozen years. Soft-skinned, no claws, no venom, no natural plating. The galaxy had spent 40 cycles since first contact treating human anatomy as an oversight, a species that had forgotten to evolve teeth. The Grand Proving Grounds existed for exactly one purpose: to let 2 civilizations settle a trade dispute without firing a single shot across open space. Champions fought. Whoever stood at the end decided which world's tariffs collapsed and which world's borders held. Bloodless war, the treaty called it, though nobody who watched the matches called it bloodless for long. Today the dispute belonged to Earth and the Euro clans over mining rights along 3 border systems. Today Earth's champion was a woman who stood 1.7 meters tall and weighed less than one of Gorthak's individual arms. The horn for the first event sounded through the chamber walls, a low note that vibrated in her sternum. "Ascension wall," Pix announced, voice climbing half an octave. 60 meters, no equipment permitted beyond the body you were issued. Kira stood, rolled her shoulders, and walked toward the gate without looking back. The wall rose out of the arena floor like a slab of dark glass, 60 meters of sheer composite stone with no visible handholds, no ledges, nothing a sane species would attempt barehanded. 6 other competitors lined up beside her at the starting mark. A Dravatian with corrosive blood-flexed clawed fingers that could already be seen dimpling the rock in anticipation. A Silthari technician adjusted 6 limbs in a stance built for precision climbing. A crystalline Vultrex shimmered, already half-phased into the wall's surface, the way its species did when they wanted an unfair head start. None of them looked at Kira twice. Why would they? She had no claws to dig in, no acid to soften stone, no phase shift to cheat the climb entirely. The starting horn cracked across the arena. The Euro and Dravatian competitors went straight at the surface, claws biting deep gouges into the rock with each pull. The Vultrex simply melted partway through the wall and reappeared higher up, laughing in a voice like wind chimes. The Silthari moved with surgical precision, finding microfractures invisible to anyone without compound eyes. Kira ran at the wall. 3 full strides, flat out, building speed against open ground. On the 4th stride, her boot hit the vertical stone and kept moving, converting forward momentum straight up the face the way she'd been taught to clear a 6-foot obstacle during selection. Except this obstacle kept going for 60 meters, and there was nothing waiting at the bottom but a long fall onto basalt. She caught the first true handhold 4 meters up, fingers locking onto a seam barely wide enough for 2 knuckles. The impact jarred up through her wrist into her shoulder. She didn't stop to feel it. Below her, the gallery had gone quiet in a different way than the silence later. This was the silence of an audience recalculating. Hand over hand, she climbed the way she'd trained for 2 decades, finding leverage in places built for nothing, trusting grip strength over claws she didn't have. At the 30-meter mark, she passed the crystalline Vultrex, who had slowed to phase through a denser section of composite. At 40 meters, she drew level with the Silthari, whose 6 limbs gave it precision but not speed. By the platform at the top, 3 competitors stood waiting. Kira was the third to arrive. Behind her, the Dravatian and a heavyset Euro shock trooper were still 40 meters down, clawing at stone that no longer had anything new to offer them. A voice crackled across the arena's speaker system, flat and procedural. Combat ring assignments randomized. First match, Voss Terran versus Sliss Dravatian. Kira looked down at the lizard, already waiting in the ring below, tongue flicking, acid glands visibly swollen along his jaw. She flexed her bare right hand once, feeling the tape pull tight across her knuckles, and started down toward the ring. Sliss flicked his tongue twice and lunged, talons extended toward her exposed forearm, jaw glands already swollen with the acid he meant to spray the instant his claws drew blood. Kira didn't meet the strike. She stepped past it, letting the talons cut empty a hand's width from her skin, and brought the edge of her palm down into the narrow gap where his neck scales failed to overlap. The lizard staggered. He recovered fast, snapping his head around for a second pass, and that was the mistake. She was already inside his reach. Her palm heel caught the hinge of his jaw, the exact point where bone met cartilage, and something in his bite reflex simply stopped working. He opened his mouth to spray, and nothing came. She drove an elbow into his solar plexus before he found his footing again. He folded, acid glands sealing shut on reflex, and went down without a single drop spilled onto the sand. Not one cut, not one burn. The Dravatian, who had killed 2 opponents in this same ring without taking a wound, lay unconscious at her feet, and Kira hadn't broken his skin once. The gallery noise died down to a low murmur, the sound of several hundred translators working overtime, trying to find a word in their own languages for what they'd just watched. She didn't wait to enjoy it. The medics jogged out to drag Sliss off the sand, and the next gate was already grinding open. The maze of shadows didn't look like much from the entrance, a low corridor lit by soft blue panels, the walls smooth and unremarkable. The first holographic projection hit her 4 steps in, an image built from her own service file, a battlefield she remembered from a war that had ended badly for the men standing next to her. The system was designed to dig out a species' worst memory and play it on loop until the competitor's nerve broke. It had ended 3 other competitors' runs before noon. Kira closed her eyes. She didn't need them. She trailed her right hand along the wall, feeling for the seams in the stone, the faint vibration of the maze's moving sections shifting somewhere beneath the floor. Sound told her enough. Touch told her the rest. The projection screamed somewhere behind her, useless against a woman who had simply opted out of looking. A second hologram flared to her left, something with too many teeth and her sister's voice. she kept walking. Her hand never left the wall. Up in the observation gallery, that was when things started to come apart. The senior Euro envoy, a broad-chested official named Threll, who had spent the morning laughing into his translator, stopped laughing. He leaned forward against the rail, all four eyes fixed on the readout feed beside the arena floor. "Run the Dravatian's biometrics again," he said. His aide didn't move fast enough. "Now." The feed scrolled past in cold blue text. Sliss's vitals showed no acid discharge, no lacerations, no internal trauma beyond the jaw and the solar plexus strike that had ended the match. A species built to kill, with corrosive blood, had been disarmed by a creature that never once let him bleed. "She didn't fight him," Threll said slowly. "She disassembled him." Beside him, a Silthari trade liaison adjusted her compound eyes toward the maze feed, where the human moved through a corridor of manufactured terror with her own eyes shut, navigating by touch, like the holograms weren't even running. "The Terran files," the liaison said. "Pull them again, all of them." What came up wasn't a weapons inventory. It wasn't armor specs or energy yields. It was a list of names, dozens of them, each one a discipline, codified systems for breaking joints, collapsing windpipes, disabling muscle groups, built and refined and taught across generations on a world with no natural claws, no natural venom, no plating of any kind. A species that had looked at its own bare hands and methodically engineered them into something worse than teeth. Threll's translator hummed faintly against his throat, picking up the unsteady rhythm of his own breathing. Around him, the gallery had gone quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when every official in it is doing the same math at once and arriving at the same answer. "We didn't strip her weapon," he said. "We just made her use the only one she ever needed." His aide didn't answer. The aide was watching the overhead screen, where Kira had just stepped out of the maze's far exit without a mark on her, eyes opening calmly into the white light as if she'd merely taken a short walk. Below, in the holding corridor outside the final arena, Kira pressed 2 fingers against her ribs, where Sliss's failed claw strike had still managed to bruise her, testing the give, cataloging the damage with the same flat focus she'd used on the lizard. Pix hovered nearby, all 6 eyes wide now instead of nervous. "The Env wants the match suspended," Pix said. "He's saying it isn't a fair contest." "It isn't," Kira said. "Tell him I agree." Pix's eyes blinked out of sequence again, faster this time. "He means unfair to you." Kira almost laughed. She didn't, because laughing pulled at the bruised ribs, and because the gate ahead of her was already grinding open onto the largest arena floor in the station, where Gorthak the Render stood waiting under banks of harsh white light, 4 arms loose at his sides, bone plating catching the glare like polished armor. He was watching the maze feed replay on the overhead screen above him, her own silent walk through the corridor of horror looping behind his head. When the gate finished opening and she stepped through, he turned to face her fully for the first time, and the casual amusement that had been on his face all morning was gone. "You broke the lizard without touching his blood," Gorthak said. His voice carried through the translator with a low rumble underneath the words. "A neat trick. It will not work twice." "I don't need it to work twice," Kira said. "I only need it to work once." Gorthak's upper lip pulled back from teeth built for tearing, not speaking. He took 1 step closer, close enough that the floor panels groaned faintly under his weight, and lowered his voice the way a much larger creature does when it wants the threat to land quietly instead of loudly. "They told us your kind builds machines because your bodies are weak," he said. "I begin to think that was a lie someone told themselves to sleep at night." "Could be," Kira said. "Or maybe we just got tired of waiting for the machines to show up." The horn for the final match hadn't sounded yet. Above them, the gallery had gone almost entirely silent, save for one voice, Threll's, still arguing with an aide about whether the match could legally be stopped now that the dispute's outcome had already started shifting weight on the betting boards mounted along the upper concourse. It couldn't be stopped. The rules were absolute. No weapons, no armor, no withdrawal once both champions stood on the floor, and both champions were already on the floor. Gorthak flexed all four hands at once, claws catching the light, and the starting horn finally cracked across the arena. Gorthak closed the gap in 2 strides, faster than something his size had any right to move, and the first swing came low, meant to take her legs out before the fight even started. Kira wasn't there when it landed. She'd already dropped under it, driving her elbow up and in, into the soft seam where his hip plates failed to meet, the one structural floor bone armor always carried no matter how thick. He roared, more surprise than pain, and stumbled half a step. She didn't follow up. Following up against 4 arms meant trading reach for nothing. She circled instead, watching the rhythm of his stance, the way his weight shifted a half-second before each strike telegraphed itself. "Stand still," Gorthak said, low and furious now. "No." He swung with 2 arms at once, a scissoring motion meant to trap her between them. She slid through the gap before it closed, close enough to feel the wind off his claws, and drove a short hook into the same hip seam a second time. The plate cracked, audible even over the crowd noise that had started up again, a low roaring murmur that hadn't existed 20 minutes earlier when nobody had believed she'd survived the ascension wall. Gorthak caught her on the backswing. A glancing blow, just his forearm, but it still carried enough mass to throw her sideways into the barrier wall. The impact lit up the bruised ribs from Sliss's earlier strike, a flare of pain sharp enough that her vision narrowed for half a second. She used the half-second. Falling sideways, she let her body roll instead of fighting the momentum, coming back up under his guard while he was still finishing the swing that had hit her. Her palm caught the underside of his jaw, snapping his head back, and she felt rather than heard the click of something realigning in his neck that wasn't supposed to realign that way. He staggered. For the first time since the horn sounded, Gorthak the Render took a full step backward. Up in the gallery, Threll had stopped arguing with his aide entirely. He stood gripping the rail with both upper hands, all 4 eyes locked on the floor below, watching a fight that no longer resembled the contest anyone had filed paperwork for that morning. "Pull the original betting odds," he said quietly. His aide checked, 40-1 against the human winning, my lord. "Adjust them." "To what?" Threll didn't answer right away. Below, Gorthak had recovered his footing and come in again, this time with all 4 arms working together, a pattern built to overwhelm anything that wasn't fast enough to read it. Kira read it. She slipped the outer 2 strikes, took a glancing hit from the third across her shoulder that opened a shallow cut, and used the opening from the 4th to drive a knee into the same cracked hip plate. It gave entirely. Gorthak's leg buckled. "To whatever number reflects the fact that we do not understand what we are looking at," Threll said finally. That was the moment the dread really settled into the gallery, not as a single line spoken aloud, but as a silence that spread outward from the Envoy's box across every species watching. The Silthari liaison had stopped recording notes. The Voltrex trade delegate, fluid form usually in constant restless motion, had gone still. Somewhere in the lower tier, a junior Dravatian attaché who had bet heavily on the Render quietly slid his data tablet off the rail and let it drop. Kira didn't see any of it. Her whole world had narrowed to the space between her hands and Gorthak's collapsing structure, the same clinical focus she'd carried into every match that day. Gorthak, on one knee now, looked up at her with something that wasn't quite the arrogance from that morning anymore. "You are not what the files said," he managed. "The files were written by people who never had to fight us," Kira said. "Get up, we are not done." He got up. Whatever else could be said about Gorthak the Render, he didn't quit on his knees, not in front of his own clan's banner hanging from the gallery rail. He came at her one more time, slower now, favoring the cracked hip, but still carrying enough raw mass that a clean hit from any of his 4 arms would have ended the match the other way. She let him close the distance. That was the part that would look later on the replay feeds across 7 sectors, like a mistake, like she'd simply run out of room to retreat. It wasn't a mistake. It was the last piece of the plan she'd built standing in that preparation chamber 11 hours earlier, taping her own knuckles while Pix asked her nervous questions about armor she wasn't wearing. His upper right arm came down in a strike meant to end things. She caught his wrist instead of dodging it, used his own forward momentum to pull herself up his torso, the way a person climbs a wall that's decided to fight back, planting one boot against his chest plate and swinging her weight up onto his shoulders before he understood what was happening. For one suspended second, the entire arena watched a 100-kilogram mass advantage become irrelevant, because mass didn't matter once you were behind it instead of in front of it. Her legs locked around his torso. Her bare arms slid under the gap at his neck, where the plating had never quite closed, the same gap she'd studied from across the arena floor an hour earlier without anyone noticing she was studying it. Gorthak roared and slammed backward into the energy barrier, trying to crush her against it. The impact lit every bruised rib in her body at once, a white flash of pain that would have made most opponents let go. She didn't let go. In the gallery, Threll's aide had stopped speaking entirely. Threll himself leaned so far over the rail, his translator nearly slipped from around his neck. "Sound the medical alert," he said, voice unsteady now. "Whatever happens next, sound it before, not after." The aide didn't move. Nobody in the gallery moved. Below them, on the cracked sand of the arena floor, the three-time champion of the Euro clans staggered under the weight of a creature less than half his mass. And for the first time in 9 cycles of unbroken victories, Gorthak the Render had no idea how to make it stop. The barrier sparked again as Gorthak threw his weight backward a second time, trying to drive her into the energy field hard enough to break the lock. Her ribs screamed. She breathed through it, the way she'd breathed through worse on worse ground, and tightened the arm under his jaw another half-inch. 4 arms thrashed, losing coordination one limb at a time as the choke did its slow, patient work. The lower left arm went first, dropping useless to his side. Then the upper right, the one that had nearly ended the match minutes earlier, fell still. "Stand still," she said, echoing his own words back at him, quiet enough that only he could hear it. He didn't have a smart answer for that. He didn't have enough air left to make one. Gorthak's knees hit the sand. The crowd noise, which had built to a continuous roar through the worst of the struggle, dropped away all at once, the way a held breath drops away when it finally lets go. His remaining 2 arms scraped weakly at her forearm, fingers losing their grip strength along with everything else. His eyes rolled back. The 4-armed mountain that had stood undefeated for 9 cycles folded forward into the basalt dust and stopped moving. Kira held the lock 3 full seconds, past the point his body went slack, the way she'd been trained to, making certain it wasn't a feint. Then she let go and rolled clear, both hands pressed flat against the sand, breathing hard, blood running warm down her shoulder from the shallow cut his claws had opened earlier. The energy field over the arena flashed blue. Match concluded. For a moment nobody in the gallery spoke. Then medics in pale grey uniforms were sprinting across the sand toward Gorthak's unmoving body, and a second team reached Kira half a step behind them, and the silence broke into 100 translators, all working at once, a wall of sound in 24 languages saying some version of the same thing. Threll hadn't moved from the rail. He stood with both upper hands still gripping the metal, watching the medics roll Gorthak onto his back, checking the rise and fall of his chest. "He's breathing," the lead medic called up. "Unconscious, cracked ribs, dislocated jaw, fractured hip plate. He'll recover." Something in Threll's shoulders came down half an inch, the only visible sign of relief on a body built for very little of it. Down on the sand, a second medic was working on Kira's shoulder, pressing a sealant patch over the claw mark while she sat with her hand pressed flat against her own ribs, the cracked ones, testing how far she could breathe before it hurt. "Anything broken?" the medic asked. "2 ribs, Kira said, "maybe 3. You should be lying down." "I will, after." She looked up at the gallery, at Threll still gripping the rail, and held his gaze across the whole width of the arena floor. He was the one who looked away first. It was the senior observer, an older Voltrex official whose fluid form had gone unusually solid with tension, who finally spoke into the arena's open channel, her voice carrying out over the settling crowd. The Terran champion stands. The match is decided in favor of Earth's claim on the contested mining systems. A pause, the kind that carries more weight than the words around it. All 7 border sector records will be updated to reflect today's outcome. Kira didn't smile. She'd learned a long time ago that the moment right after winning was not the moment to look like you'd enjoyed it. 2 medics helped her to her feet. As they walked her toward the gate, she passed within a few meters of where Gorthak lay being lifted onto a stretcher, jaw wired, 4 arms finally still. He was conscious again, barely, eyes half open and tracking her as she passed. "Next time," he said, voice thick and slurred through a jaw that no longer worked right, "bring a weapon." Kira looked down at her bare hand, the tape across her knuckles soaked through with blood that wasn't all hers. "I did," she said. She kept walking. Behind her, in the observation gallery, the senior Voltrex official had already turned to a side channel reserved for diplomatic traffic, speaking low and fast to someone off the visible feed. "Pull every record we have on Terran combative training," she said. "Not just this woman, all of them. I want to know how many more of these exist before the next trial is scheduled, and I want it before sundown." Nobody answered her right away. Across the gallery, delegates from 4 other species were having some version of the same conversation. Quietly, urgently, the betting boards overhead still flickering with odds nobody had thought to update in time. In the medical bay beneath the arena, Kira sat on the edge of a cot, while a different medic ran a scanner over her ribs, confirming what she already knew. Pix hovered in the doorway, 6 eyes wide, no longer nervous so much as simply unable to stop watching her. "They're saying it on 3 different channels already," Pix said, "that the Renders people want a rematch, that they think it was luck." "It wasn't luck." Kira flexed her bandaged hand once, slow, testing the grip. "I know," Pix's eyes blinked, out of sequence as always. "I don't think they do, not yet." Outside, in the corridor leading back toward the transport bay, Threll stood alone for a moment before his aide caught up to him, holding out a data tablet with the final betting figures already adjusting themselves in real time, climbing toward numbers nobody on the Euro clan's side wanted to look at directly. He didn't take the tablet. He was looking instead at the long recording loop still playing on a side screen near the gate, the moment from the final match where a bare human hand found the gap at Gorthak's throat and closed. "They stripped her of every weapon we could think to ban," he said quietly, mostly to himself, "and we forgot to ban the only one she actually needed." His aide didn't answer. There wasn't an answer that made the number on the tablet smaller. Kira walked out of the medical bay an hour later, ribs taped, shoulder sealed, the corridor lights catching the dried blood still crusted along her knuckles. She didn't stop to wash it off. She wrapped fresh tape over it instead, the same way she had 11 hours earlier in the preparation chamber, hand over hand, scar tissue over scar tissue. Behind her, on a dozen screens across the station, the recording kept looping, a calloused hand closing. The arena had not banned weapons. It had only made her close her fists.